What is up, degenerates, and welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. It's Monday, baby, and we got fights this week. Last week, it was definitely a Monday. There were no fights to speak of, except for that weird PFL card where there was no USA coverage for God knows what reason. Apparently, it was awful, so I think it's okay that we didn't end up doing much with it, but confession time last week without any MMA, and obviously I didn't spend any time studying or prepping for anything. I blew a wad on college football. I was throwing darts left and right, and the bankroll is struggling because I decided to lose my mind on the gridiron here last week. So we need the MMA back. We need to get this thing rolling again because we are still well and true on our quest for 100 units profit for the first time in my betting career. And we can only do that in the UFC's octagon, any octagon, frankly, but back in the cage, baby. So let's go. We got fights this week. We are on a roll. We got right. We had a week off, got the brain right. We're good to go. I cannot wait for this show. What's everybody doing tonight? We got my guy Dream in the house. Mushroom Air Dog saying UFC is back. We have got Brown Belt Dave in the house. Hoping everybody is refreshed and ready to go. My guy Dix Insider, of course, as always, hanging out with us. I hope you all are doing well, kicking some ass this week. We have already got the live viewers rolling, and everybody do me a favor and hit the like button. And if you haven't hit the like button, you're gonna want to hit it because this week's guest is one of the diehard faithful, one of the favorites. This is a friend of ours from the Club and Sub podcast, rocking a new sexy layout, none other than MMA Fox. What's going on, my guy? How you doing today?
What's going on, Clint? How are you? I'm great. You want to hear a funny story? Whenever I listen to your show, it's either at the gym, when I'm driving, or when I'm working. So I'm never really watching it. So I've never seen that intro video before. And it is pretty sweet. I was a big fan.
Thank you. That's funny. I did not realize that, but I'm pretty proud of that intro video. Like the song, that one really gets me ramped up and ready to go for my own show. I'm back here headbanging. No one can see me during the intro. And then just picked a couple of my favorite knockouts. I think I need to go back, though, and update it every year. I think during like the Christmas break annually, I need to find a couple new KOs to slot in that spot for the new year. We'll see if I can get a graphics guy to pull that off for me or not. But thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
How was your last week? Any action? I know we didn't have any notable UFC stuff going on, but did you do anything?
So you're having the best year of your life. I am having the inverse of that. You're trying to get to 100 units this year. I'm trying to not lose money for the first time in 4 years. And it's an uphill climb with 3 months to go, I got to say. I gambled a bit on Cage Warriors. Didn't go well. I got $1 of CLV on Top Neuqueram in Ryzen. Lost a very controversial split decision. So
I heard about that one.
Yeah. So yeah, I did bet some stuff. It did not go great though.
Okay. Well, I am sorry to hear that, but we're going to rub off on you a little bit. We're going to turn your luck around here on the show. We are definitely running hot. And you and I have had a couple conversations behind the curtain, and I had the worst year of my life last year, and it fed right into the best year of my life. So, I mean, you got to just ride the wave, man. You know all about how that variance works. Sometimes you look like an idiot for taking the shot. Sometimes you look like a genius. It'll work its way back around. It'll be all right. But here we go, man. We've got UFC Vegas 80 this week. Can't believe we've already had 80 UFC Vegas cards, but here we are. Let's get this bad boy started. Kicking off your evening with Montana De La Rosa taking on JJ Aldrich in what is already my first bet of the evening, John. I absolutely love this spot. Recency bias at its finest, it's always women's MMA. Why is it always women's MMA for the recency bias? I don't know why, but it is. They have one good performance, and everyone just thinks they're a world beater for God knows what reason. They forget what they thought of them coming into the fight. I don't. The swings in women's MMA public perception is just insanity. Montana De La Rosa, 12-8-1, can't really write home about her. She's now the breadwinner. Mr. De La Rosa is taking care of the kids and, trying to be her part-time coach. God love him, after getting released by the UFC. But this lady is crazy aggressive in the cage. Tall, lanky build, aggressive offensive grappler. She's just 28 years old, man. She's one of these ones where she's been around for a while. She's battle tested, trial by fire in the UFC, and she's on a bit of a tough skid. 1-3-1 in her last 5. But she's proven that she belongs, and it seems like she's making improvements. Decent gas tank, decent wrestling, striking is coming along, but she's got that physicality edge over a lot of women, and sometimes that's all you need, quite frankly. She's also mean, though, and personally, that's a point in her favor. Anytime you get one of these women's MMA fighters who's angry, I tend to like them a little bit more. JJ Aldrich, kind of the same boat. 12-6. She's been doing this for a long time. Very middle of the road. She's coming off a big win over Na Liang, where she, quite frankly, made a whole lot of mistakes. I actually bet Na in that fight, John. I really did, because I thought that her raw aggression at the beginning of the fight might be enough to overcome everything against JJ Aldrich. She is short on the athleticism side of things. Good boxer, decent wrestler, decently durable. Doesn't really hit hard, but she can accumulate damage with volume and accuracy. But she gets out athleticismed a lot. And this is where I think that's going to be a problem. 65% takedown defense rating. I don't know why Montana De La Rosa was the dog in the first place here. I wish I had broken this fight down sooner, because I would have jumped on her at plus money. I got pick'ems, -110. I like Montana De La Rosa a lot, man. What do you think?
Yeah, so it's like a pretty weird fight to me, because before I looked at it, Montana was the dog, to your point. Like, I saw her, she was all the way out at plus 125 a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and I was like, I'm probably going to end up betting Montana here. Took my time, though, kind of enjoyed some of the week off, tried to reset my brain a little bit. Sure enough, the line has swung the other way here, and so I'm probably not going to bet aside. What my thoughts are, I feel kind of similar to you, and also I don't. Like, it's weird, because I want to like JJ game a lot more than I do, because I think there are intriguing elements to her game. Like, obviously she's a fairly good boxer. She can be taken down, but historically she's a pretty good defensive grappler. It's hard to advance position on her. We saw Erin Blanchfield kind of struggle to take her down early in that fight and actually lose the first round. We saw Jillian Robertson basically get shut out trying to take her down and actually get out grappled in that fight. And so there are parts of this game though. No, she's not. But if you're going to, build someone to beat Montana, theoretically, you want someone who can stuff takedowns and keep it upright. The problem is, so after I taped JJ, I was like, I might actually bet JJ here. But then you watch Montana, and to your point, she's very, very tenacious. I think she is a pretty good wrestler. I think her striking is probably a bit better than it gets credit for. Fun fact. She lost the fight and obviously deserved to lose the fight, but she actually outlanded Viviane Araujo at distance in that fight. She's very, very, very game. She is not going to back down even when she's pretty heavily outgunned. And so with that in mind, I do think JJ is a bit of a better boxer, but I haven't seen much from JJ's game that makes me think that she can really deny Montana's pace. JJ, yeah, she'll box well, but she's not going to really stick and move much. It's not like she's going to suppress volume at all. Even in her wins, JJ Aldrich, you go back and outside of Na Liang, who, let's be honest, we all know is kill or be killed. It was Na Liang and Lauren Miller are the only really, really firm wins she's had in her career. Every other fight is very, very close, because she doesn't have power. She doesn't have much submission upside, and she's middle volume. And so she just doesn't really have the ability to pull away from fights ever. Yep. Whereas Montana, it's yeah, I expect the vast majority of the time this plays out, it's probably playing out as a very, very close fight. That's my suspicion. But if anybody's going to get a takedown or 2 or 3 and end up with 4 to 6 minutes of control here, to me, it's very obviously Montana. And so for that reason alone, I think you have to favor her here. I would be interested in playing her if she gets back to plus, but at minus 115, minus 120, I'm kind of happy to let it be, but I do think you have to edge her slightly in this spot, though I think it's a competitive fight.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to stick with my rose tinted glasses. I like the takedown upside. I like that. I think she can do what Na Liang did just a little better and probably keep that pace up a little bit longer. So I'm going to go ahead and ride that here and we'll see where it takes me.
Na Liang's a glass cannon. I mean, let's be honest. She's got like 4 minutes to kill you or she dies. You know,
most entertaining woman on the roster.
For sure. I hope they keep her around forever, even if she goes 0-10.
They need to. They absolutely need to. All right, man. I'm glad we got a little back and forth there. Of course, it's classic women's MMA. We can verbally joust on that kind of a fight for hours, and at the end of the day, it's going to be a split decision. So let's move on. Next up, we've got Nate Maness taking on Mateus Mendonca, and I'm really looking forward to this one, man. I'll be honest with you. I've been a big Nate Maness advocate and backer. He's a guy that I've bet a lot of money on over the course of his career. I really think Nate Maness is a guy that just does not get the love that he deserves. He's extremely well-rounded. The one thing that worries me is he's gone all TJ Dillashaw on me, man. He is now 32 years old, and he decided to drop down to 125 so he could have that size advantage, and that's a problem, man. Like, he's still doing it in his prime. It's not at the end of his career, and that's the big thing that I hate. That's the giant red flag. So I understand thinking that you'll get the advantage, but God, this guy looks like death on wheels when he makes it to Friday. So for any of you who are listening to the show right now, you know I do the Friday undefeated post-weigh-in show. Brace yourselves for it. You know it's coming. I'm going to talk about how terrible this man looks because he can hardly make it to the scale at 125. He's a dead man walking until he gets his IV. I don't know how he does it. I don't know why he does it. And my fear is that he's overcompensating for a lack of skill in some area. And that's upsetting because I actually think he's very well-rounded. I actually think he's very skilled essentially everywhere, but I think the weight cut might be hurting him more than helping him. Now, obviously, I'm not in there, and I don't know that for certain, and he's taken on guys like freaking Umar Nurmagomedov, who I thought was going to take the title this year if he didn't get injured, so you can't hold that against him too harshly either, but Tony Gravely almost killed him. He had the most miraculous Saved by the Bell comeback moment against Tony and took him out there in that spot. You know, Luke Sanders, a guy that can be had, Johnny Munoz Jr., Kellen Van Camp, like he just doesn't have a great resume when you run it back a little bit. So I think Nate Maness is always a live dog, and at dog odds, always something that I'm interested in taking a shot on. But man, Mateus looks like he's a real prospect. 24 years old, shoot the box, who, by the way, could not be streaking any harder right now. These shoot the box kids lately have looked like the goods, man. Even when they lose, they're coming out there and looking like they're going to take people's heads off right up until the end.
Would you say great doctors?
Yeah. No, they hired the absolute best doctors over at Shoot the Box these days. So hey, their cardio is much improved recently. I'm not sure what that's all about, but something's in the water. And he's coming off a loss against Javid, a spot where I was really, scratching the chin on. I'm like, you've got two hot undefeated prospects. Why are you throwing them there? It just didn't really add up. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I think, Javid obviously is the guy the UFC is really looking to get behind at this point. Mendonca, though, he's a monster, especially early on. He's got a lot of early finishes. He's another guy that's got good, solid kicks. He plays the range game really well. He's got those flashy spinning heel kicks. I'm just worried that Nate's ability to tank damage at 125 is going to be cut short a little bit here on Saturday, man. If this fight goes 15, I think that Nate is going to be well in it, and he's going to look very live at the plus 220 odds that he's getting right now. But I also think this fight is not going a full 15 minutes. I'm waiting to see the totals. I don't know what the number is right now, obviously. But if we get a decent under number, I will be taking it. And I kind of am having to predict Mateus Mendonca by knockout.
Do you want the total? Do you want the total?
Yes, I do.
Under 2.5 is minus 130.
See, that's sus. Why is it only minus 130?
And it looks like some money's coming on Nate.
I mean, I think he's super live, man. I would rather play violence myself. I think I'm going to be looking at that under. Definitely looking very closely at that under, but
no,
I'm not sure I want to take a shot on the dog. Maybe I'm just chickening out here. I hate when I go against my guy, though. You know what I mean? Someone who I've gone to the well with time and time again, and then I decide not to one time. That's when they always come through, and I could have just stuck with them one more. So maybe I'll just play violence here.
Sorry for interrupting you there. I was actually just reading Dixon Sider's post. That's why I screamed no, that the Montel Jackson fight is off.
Oh, no.
I bet Montel big.
Out. That sucks. Oh, wait a sec. Gutierrez,
suck.
though, is staying on the card, though, it looks like. That's all right.
Yeah.
Or not this card, though. Next card, I guess. You're saying not a drill. All right. Thank you, Dixon Sider, for the update. Definitely appreciate that. That'll save us a little time as we're going through these breakouts here.
So yeah, Nate Maness, Mateus Mendonca. When I saw this was announced and when I saw the line, I was like, I am going to bet Nate Maness quite large here, just because he checks a lot of boxes for me. He's got a lot more fights. He's much better wins than Mateus Mendonca. Like if you go back through Mateus's career, he hasn't, he's an interesting prospect. And to your point, there's all the shoot-a-box stuff on his side. And that obviously, look, I'm at the point with them now after seeing the dude who came out and fought Cop, where it's just like, I'm just going to assume they're showing up, as mutants here and are just not going to be killable. It's how many in a row does it have to happen with? It's like 6 different guys now we've seen it with, even on Contender Series. But nonetheless, I mean, Maness having the experience he's had and the wins that he's got and being plus 220 made no sense. But then I look at it and I see, to your point, I'm not going to rehash it, but 125, and it's like, what are we doing here? Why? Like why? And Mendonca's not a flyweight. He's been fighting at bantamweight as well. I really don't understand why they're choosing to make this fight here. And it kind of scares me because, yeah, I guess one could make the argument Mendonca is going to be facing the same issues as Nate, except there's a big, and one of my friends did make this argument to me today. The difference is Mendonca's 5'6". He's about the size that a lot of these bigger flyweights are. Nate Maness is 5'10". Like that guy could make featherweight. He did not look like he was a skinny 5'10" when he was fighting at bantamweight. He looked like a giant. So I mean, it's a huge concern to me, and it's to the point where I don't know if I want to bet him at all here. But I do sort of think instinctively he kind of has to be the side. Like I agree with some of your points about Mateus. Look, he's dangerous. He obviously hits hard, decent submission game, but I also feel he has a lack of process, for lack of a better term. He's not particularly high volume. You can get volume off on him. He's not the best wrestler in the world. Like you saw him try to wrestle Javid and he just got big brothered hard there. Mm-hmm. And, I think back to Nate, and it's like Tony Gravely is a Division I wrestler. He's a very good MMA wrestler. And he more or less got shut out trying to go out wrestle Nate in that fight. So I don't really think Mateus is going to be very likely to hugely out-grapple Nate. I know Tagir Ulanbekov just did, and Umar did, but I mean, I'm pretty sure they would do horrible things to Mateus. So I kind of expect it to mostly be standing. I mean, it's not to say that Mateus can't catch like a sub or something or get an opportunistic back take, but if it's standing, it's just very, very hard for me, unless Nate is completely compromised, for me to not think this is a very close fight. Neither is the most high volume. At bantamweight, to your point, he's at tremendous durability. Now, I don't know if that'll stay down here, and we don't really know what Mateus' durability is like, but I'm kind of expecting a medium tempo kickboxing match where Nate's probably got more power than him, and he's the much more seasoned fighter. He's been in a lot more like tricky situations than
he's a big finisher too.
He is a big finisher, and that's kind of like my point, because like I feel like we're here. It's very hard to say, oh, Mateus finishes this at a much higher clip than Nate does. I don't really think you can say that. And if you can't say that, can you say he wins a decision at a much higher clip? The one thing that scares me is the weight cut. Without the weight cut, I'd be like, this is a pick'em fight. I'm going balls to the wall on Nate here. But the weight cut, it's like an element of, it's a variable that we can't really account for, because it could have no impact, or it could mean in retrospect, we're like, wow, Nate was plus 800 there, and that was like the worst bet I've ever made, So I'm torn. I'm thinking about betting Nate small. The weight cut does scare me, though.
Yeah, the one fight that we have to go off is the Tagir fight, and he got tapped in the first round. So, like, Was that a mental lapse? Like, did he just make a mistake and get caught, or was he exhausted from the weight cut and that's what led to that? I don't know. I really
And
don't.
Tahir's a beast.
Frankly, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm right there with you, man. It's confusing. I want to go to war with my guy Nate. I'm kind of leaning the other way from, recency bias, and you bring up some very valid points. Maybe just the under. Dixon Sider asking live bet Nate if he survives round one. I mean, maybe, but if he survives round one, he's probably beating that ass. So he might not be he might not be worth a bet at that point. I wonder what the line would look like. So weird fight, man. Really tough one to call, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. So we're kind of keeping our hands to ourselves here on that one, but moving on, we've got another women's MMA fight here. Kanako Murata makes her return to the UFC here, taking on Vanessa Demopoulos. Oh, baby. So we talked a little bit about it, John. I've got this theory that physicality in women's MMA is the end-all be-all. And if you're just bigger and stronger and more muscly than your opponent in women's MMA, it tends to work. And a lot of times I actually think Vanessa is a little underrated because she has that. She might be a former stripper, but she's also got watermelons in her thighs and can bulldoze people and take them down. She's been working at Extreme Couture. I don't like that she left my Fight Ready MMA, but if there's a place that she could go where I would be okay and feel good about it, it would be a place like Extreme Couture. So I like her. And I actually was, taking the dog shot against Karolina because, as always, I just simply must fade Karolina in her return to the UFC. I thought she stood a good shot in that fight, but she got stonewalled on takedown attempts in that fight. Karolina was not having it. And even though she did land that one big power shot that wobbled Karolina in round one, she's just not a good striker, man. She doesn't have the volume. She doesn't have the timing. She doesn't have the pace. She can't keep it up. Like, she really needs to club people and get them to the ground. Otherwise, she's going to lose a striking matchup. She's taking on somebody who's better at what she does than her in Kanako Murata here. That's all it comes down to. She's a better wrestler. She might be a little bit smaller, but dear God, she's got more muscle on her. And she does the same exact punch her way into range, overhand right, bomb type thing. I don't have any problem laying the chalk here with Kanako. I don't really like tipping the hat here a little bit, man. I think the Asian MMA thing, outside of a few small exceptions, they're just not as good as the other countries at MMA. I don't know if it's the weight cutting thing because they're not as physically strong as us. I don't know. I'm really not sure. I don't know what it is, but it seems like there's a handful of elites and then the has-nots. So I try to kind of, shy away from them just a little bit. But Kanako Murata is kind of one of those exceptions. She's been wrestling her whole damn life, and she's built like a truck. She's going to be able to out-wrestle somebody like Vanessa in this spot. And when they throw overhand rights, I think she's going to land harder. I got Murata, probably a decision, but I don't mind laying the chalk here.
I'm going to say something that if I'm wrong, you're never going to let me on the podcast ever again with you. Kanako Murata is a free square this week. She is a free square. I bet her shortly after this line opened around -250, but I think there's value at the -400. I think there would be value at -500. I think she's close to 90% in this fight, to be quite honest with you here. Everything you just said, I agree with. Vanessa Demopoulos, bottom line, I've bet her a bunch. Look, she is a good finisher for WMMA, and that is a rare commodity in WMMA, which always leads to the market tending to undervalue her. What I think the market overvalues about Vanessa Demopoulos is she has a bunch of submissions on her record from earlier in her career. Mm-hmm. If you actually watch her on bottom, she's not a very good submission grappler, at all. Look at Karolina in side control, literally just mugging her on top. Karolina, who is not much of a grappler herself. Vanessa, if you have any idea about positional awareness, she's got nothing for you off her back, and she can't get up. She also can't defend takedowns at all. You pretty much have to have no idea about how to stop an armbar to get caught by Vanessa Demopoulos, like Silvana Gomez Juarez. She's just not a very processed fighter. She has terrible takedown defense. Even on the feet, I kind of think Murata is probably the better striker and could just jab her at distance for a bit, but she's not going to do that. She's going to take her down. Kanako Murata, she beat Emily Ducote in a 5-round fight, grappling the whole way. She absolutely mugged Randa Marcos, Randa Marcos is a one-time top 15 strawweight, and who even today I would make a decent-sized favorite over Vanessa Demopoulos, and she cut through her. I mean, yeah, she got her arm broken in an armbar attempt by Jandiroba in her last fight, but Verna Jandaroba would be legitimately
That's my
minus
girl
like
right there.
1,500. Yeah, she
She's a
would destroy
beast.
Vanessa Demopoulos. Yeah, she's a monster, and she's huge for the weight class. Yeah, honestly, I don't see it in the tape. I don't see it in the macro. I think this is as easy a matchup as it gets for Kanako Murata, to be honest.
The one thing I want to see is the weigh-ins and the face-offs, just because I know Murata's kind of short of stature. Vanessa, it's very rare that she is taller than her opponents.
Yeah.
And she will, by the numbers here, have a 1-inch height advantage. Again, I really don't think it'll matter at the end of the day. But John, and I know we're talking UFC here, obviously not the last Bellator card of all time, but could I interest you in maybe a Kanako Murata and Liz Carmouche parlay?
Possibly. You might be able to interest me in that.
On, McFarlane, what's her name? Ileana?
Yeah, Lima, and she's gonna smash
Lima.
her. Yeah, she's gonna go through her.
Man, Girlrilla is maybe the most underrated women's MMA fighter of all time, and I've just been smashing her repeatedly in every opportunity I've gotten in Bellator, and she simply has not let me down. And I think I'm going to go back to well.
Add a little Cyborg on top of that.
Yeah. I mean, Cyborg obviously against poor Kat Zingano. I think Kat is long past her expiration date, unfortunately.
Yes.
And by the way, this is coming from somebody, folks, who was absolutely in love with Kat Zingano. Like, I was the one who was crowning her the next champion here in the UFC before she got that awkward head kick eye poke situation that was her last UFC fight. Like, she's unfortunately very done. So yeah, no, I'm with you there. But that might be a play that I'm going to make, folks, because I want to find a way onto Murata. I agree with John. Free square is a very strong term, but I agree with him here on this one. And I want to find my way onto Liz as well. So we might get a little Bellator x UFC parlay on
Have you ever heard me say someone is a free square before? Oh, I texted you once.
I don't think I have.
One time in our Twitter conversations, I told you Pat Sabatini against Lucas Almeida was a free square.
You're correct. That would be the one time. So I've never heard you say it. I read your text one time. Yes. All right. Moving right along, everybody. We've got some more good stuff down the pipe here. We got Johnny Munoz Jr. taking on Aoriqileng in maybe... Oh, this fight is so confusing, John. I don't even know what I was going to say to tee that up because I'm just completely lost on this fight. So Johnny Munoz Jr., another one of these guys that I've been very fond of. Another guy whose skill set I have vaunted, and I like his boxing. I like how technical he is. He's very smooth. His grappling, he's so nasty on the mat. He's got that club and something going on where he'll make you shoot on him if he clips you hard enough and then sinks up a guillotine. I really love his overall game. The problem is, he is not a wrestler. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, so he will lose rounds on bottom. He will play off of his back, and that's something I've been focusing on this year, is not playing so much of the guys who will fish for subs off their back. I lost a lot of units last year, John, playing guys who would do just that. They would lose rounds. They'd be live. Maybe they'd lock up an armbar, but not quite get it. And then, I just lost a lot of money doing that, and I went, okay, no more guard pullers. Well, that's kind of Johnny Munoz Jr. Thankfully, he's got the offense to back it up. So he's not just a guard puller. He is a good boxer to go with it. And he's taking on a guy in Aoriqileng who I could not have been more wrong about in his last fight, man. I talked about the durability. I'm like, he's a decisionator. Like, you only have to worry about the subs with him. He really can take an absolute beating. So moving up a weight class, didn't think it was going to be a problem for him. And Amin Zahabi, he's kind of the B-side Zahabi brother. He's not going to grab a neck on this guy. So for sure, we're going a full 15 minutes, right? And I think he edges out a win. Bro got nuked in the first round. Like, he got absolutely destroyed by Zahabi. Never saw that coming for an instant. First guy to ever knock you out professionally is freaking Amin Zahabi, right after I told everybody how durable you are. Embarrassing, John, embarrassing. So here we go. This is a spot where I am wondering why Johnny Munoz Jr. was the dog to begin with. I know it's a little bit of recency bias. We just saw this guy get KO'd stiff, but he obviously fills that gap there. You know, the only way you finish this man is by submission. And if they're going to be on the feet, it's going to be competitive as far as volume goes. I think Munoz is probably the cleaner boxer. So I think he'll edge out those striking exchanges. And then in the grappling, even if Johnny Munoz does accept a little bit of bottom position, he'll be attacking and threatening. And that's where I think he can catch Aoriqileng. So I definitely lean towards Johnny Munoz Jr., but I'm almost worried he's the mush this week, man. Everybody I know has a Johnny Munoz Jr. ticket, and he's now pick'em. I'm like, why is he only a pick'em? Like, why did the bookies not open this guy as minus 150? They think Aoriqileng, are they just that wrong? And maybe I'm spooking myself here. What is happening in this fight, man?
I'll be honest. When you said, and to kick this off, that it was confusing you, the fight is confusing me to a degree as well. I didn't really have a strong read on it before I looked at it, just because I've never been the biggest fan of Johnny Munoz Jr., but also it's like Aoriqileng going up, or well, not going up. I guess this is his third fight at 35, but still, a guy who was a natural flyweight now fighting at 35, kind of a scary thing, against a grappler. And, to your point, I was also on Aoriqileng in his last fight against Amin Zahabi. You know what's fun?
Hey, Marshall! You ever get tired of being wrong? I do! I really do, but I'm tired!
I'm sorry, I had to. That was both of us last time.
I actually think we probably underrated Amin Zahabi's power, because after the fight, I went back and looked at it. It's like the guy knocked out Draco Rodriguez stiff. He had another knockout early in his career. He might just be a sneakily harder hitter than anybody realized. But I'll be honest, I don't think Johnny Munoz is much of a threat to knock out Aoriqileng. I really don't. The weird thing is, when I taped up Aori first and looking at his tape, I was like, okay, he's fought two pretty good grapplers in. I don't want to say Jay Perrin's pretty good, but he's a black belt, and he got him down twice. And he fought Cody Durden, who's a very good grappler. And he managed to avoid giving up his back in any of those situations. And, we've seen Cody Durden get the backs of some pretty good defensive grapplers in the not too recent past. So I was somewhat impressed with his ability to kind of persevere, work back to his feet in those fights, not really accept being on bottom, but not give up his back. And so in my head, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's Johnny Munoz Jr. If he can do that here, he's going to light this dude up on the feet. And then I tape Munoz, and it's like, man, Johnny Munoz is a lot bigger than I remember him being. Like, for whatever reason, and I think it's probably just the style with which he fights, I always think of him as this little guy, but he's like 5'9" and pretty well muscle strapped for 135. And Aori's a guy who's fairly accustomed to being the bigger man in most of his fights, and he will not be by any stretch in this fight, which is kind of concerning. And obviously, Johnny on the mat is very, very dangerous. Great submission grappler. But as you mentioned, he's not a very good wrestler, and he's not a very good striker. So we're in this weird spot where, like, my instinct is kind of, you got to lean with the naturally bigger guy who's going to shoot. But at the same time, man, you rewatch that Daniel Santos fight. This dude pulled guard like 4 times. It's like if Aori just is like, okay, when he pulls guard, I'm just going to stay in, hands on his chest, and throw pitter-patter ground and pound, he could literally potentially 30-27 him doing that. And then, to take it a layer further, it's like you step back and you look at the two guys' careers thus far, and it's like Aori, he had tight fights with, who's the kid from Krause's gym who's currently suspended? Molina. He fought Molina very, very close. He fought Durden very, very close. He obviously beat Jay Perrin, who I know is out of the UFC, but like,
people are too tough on Jay Perrin. He's not bad.
I agree. He's got some decent regional wins. He's certainly better, and this is kind of where I'm going with it, than Ludovic Shalinian and Jamie Simmons, who are the only 2 wins in Johnny Munoz's UFC career. Johnny Munoz managed to lose a fight against Nate Maness where he had 10 minutes of control. Do you know how hard it is to lose a fight with 10 minutes of control?
Pretty tough.
Pretty difficult, I'm in this weird quandary where I feel like it's a fight where we know one guy is UFC level. Like, we are certain Aori is UFC level. I am not certain that Johnny Munoz is UFC level. I know he's got UFC level jiu-jitsu, but I'm not sure about the rest of his game if it's UFC level, personally. But then you have the size factor factored in here, and that does scare me. So it's like, I kind of lean the Aori side here, but I don't want to lean that way and then him just get bodied by a bigger guy. It's just like, what am I doing? So it's a pass for me. I lean Aori, though.
Okay. Well, we are leaning opposite sides here on this one. The one thing I can promise you, man, is that Johnny Munoz by sub will be in my submission special parlay by the end of the week. That'll be one of the legs there. I'm not sure I have much more on this fight than that, though. And it's not a great price tag either. It's like plus 265. So it's not even a good number. Definitely.
If he wins, though, if it proves that Johnny Munoz is the side, he's probably subbing him at a higher than 30% clip, in my opinion.
Probably so. I like I think one of my biggest problems, man, is I'll do my stupid little Hail Mary parlays, my little submission specials, but I won't play those straight, and I'll go like 2 out of 3 damn near every single time. And it's like, like if I had just played the 5-1 straight instead of putting it in the stupid parlay, we're having a good night. But I never want to do it if it's like under plus 300 for some God knows what stupid reason. I'm a degenerate. I need bigger numbers.
Did you know Aori was at Fight Ready?
Yes, I did actually.
I did not know
and
that.
That is something I think that is quite interesting. All those guys over there. Speaking of which, we just got the announcement that Montel Jackson is out, and Alhassan Haley will be the one filling in for that spot. All those guys, all the Mongolian guys, have transferred over to Fight Ready for some reason, and that's another piece of hesitation for me. They quite obviously have a very good grappling based gym over there. They've got guys like JSP. Shout out Brandon Olivas. That kid is an absolute stud on the mat, and he's in there training with them every day. Who else? I'm forgetting somebody. Oh yeah, Henry Cejudo. Like, they have such a stable over there, and that's the kind of thing where I'm like, man, if Aoriqileng just like leaves his neck out a little bit longer than normal and Fight Ready teaches him not to do that, he probably dominates this fight wrestling, and we get a decision win for him instead. So not a fight I really want to get in on at this point, man. And I'll be honest with you, man. I am absolutely scared of the mush in this spot. Everybody and their mother is on the dog here. And I'm like, I don't want to come in late and get the minus 110 price tag when, if I liked that side, he was what, plus 150 a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I'll just pass if that's what's going to happen instead.
Yeah, agreed. Agree here.
Yeah. All right, folks, here we go. Next up, we have got Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Diana Belbita. What a fight, man. So I teased it just a little bit earlier. I'm maybe the number one hater for Karolina Kowalkiewicz on the entire planet right now. The problem is she has a phenomenal manager. She went from getting exposed as not being one of the best in the world and getting her ass beaten to the point of retirement in title shots against the top 10 of the division. And now she's done nothing, John, but fight bottom feeders. She is on a 3-fight win streak over Felice Herrig, over Silvana Gomez Juarez, which, by the way, I think there's an argument she lost that fight, and then Vanessa Demopoulos. She is fighting absolutely nobody right now. We saw the fire die in her eyes, man. Like when she got knocked out by not Jessica Panay. When she got beaten by Yan Jonan, it was just like, she's done. She just is done. She's got nothing left to give. She's in survival mode all the time. She doesn't like getting hit. Like, this girl is done with MMA. She takes a super long layoff. She takes a break, gets her mind right, and they give her Felice Herrig, someone who maybe never should have been in the UFC to begin with, but frankly doesn't have anything but like physical strength going her way. So she just styles on her. She's getting her confidence back. Okay, that's all fine and dandy with me. I'm thinking this is finally the point where the UFC goes, okay, now you got to earn that buck. We're going to toss you to a couple of contenders. We're going to see if you can swim, or if we're going to, use your name to get a couple of careers springboarded here. Frankly, she's very well-rounded. She's a good slick striker. She knows what she's doing on the feet. She's got decent grappling. She can be out-muscled by people. That's kind of the big thing for me, is that physically speaking, KK just doesn't have that physicality going her way. If you can outpower her, you're going to win that fight. The question is Diana Belbita capable of that? She's a young fighter who could be something. Will she turn out? At this point, I don't know. She's 27. We really should be seeing those big leaps of improvements from her. And I bet her, man. I bet her against Maria Oliveira. And I was holding my breath that whole fight. She looked awful. Like, she took time off. She's been working on her game. I'm expecting big time improvements here from young Diana Belbita. And all she did was spam a 1-2. She keeps like this high boxing shell, and she's got these long loopy arms, and did nothing but walk forward and throw 1-2s and get angry. Like, I like that she's mean. I like that she hits decently hard, and I like that she wants to hurt her opponents, but her wins are Maria Oliveira and Hannah Goldie. Like, there's nothing here, man. And she really doesn't beat anybody at this level. On the regional scene, she was a big time finisher, but now up here, it's like I don't know. It's almost like she's somehow regressed, even though she's working hard and training at a higher level. I really don't know what to make of it. And for the love of God, I cannot lose more money trying to fade KK. I want to pick Diana Belbita so badly, John. Talk me off the ledge, because I really think I have to pick KK here in this spot, just as being still one step ahead, the more well-rounded fighter, the more experienced fighter. But God, if I jump off the train at the wrong time, and Diana clips her once, gets on top of her, and pounds her into oblivion, and the ref steps in and saves her, and I don't cash on a Diana Belbita TKO that's like 18-1 at this point, like I'm gonna just cry.
Yeah, it's funny. I bet KK by decision against Felice Herrig because KK is literally harmless, cannot bust a grape, never submits anybody, and somehow she submits her there. I did bet Gomez Juarez against KK, and I also thought that was a fairly close fight, and we potentially should have gotten that. And I did bet KK against Vanessa. But looking at this fight, look, I'm with you on everything you just said about Diana Belbita, and I'm having the same struggles because, for one thing, like, I hate more than almost anything in the world betting on a woman betting on someone to win at a level of competition they have never won at before. Because, yeah, sometimes it sounds good, and there's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to bet this streaking fighter. It's like, oh, wait, I didn't think about the fact that, oh, they're taking the next step up to somebody who's been fighting and looking bad against a much worse level of competition. And I feel like that could be the case here. But at the same time, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, like I just said, she doesn't have any power. She has no knockdowns in the UFC. She is grappling more, but like, I don't think her grappling is that good. I think it's mostly like she's having grappling success against women that are pretty bad grapplers.
That's kind of the thing, right?
Yeah.
The people that suck at grappling.
Like, that's honestly, if she wasn't grappling more, I would be betting Belbita for sure, because that does kind of scare me a bit. But at the same time, I'm not really sure she's gotten any better at ATT. I think she's maybe just fighting to a game plan more than she has in the past, which obviously is good for her.
And a very low level competition.
Very, very low level. And there's a lot on the KK side here that you could like, right? She's obviously fought way better women. She's much more experienced. To your point, Belbita, I bet her against Oliveira too, and I thought she looked terrible. Maria Oliveira looked like she wasn't even there to fight that fight, and that somehow ended up being a sweaty decision, which I was not really expecting going into that fight. And so I instinctively lean KK, but I got to say, there's a couple really macro things here that I think are pretty favorable on the Belbita side. In particular, she's 10 years younger than her. Like, I know she hasn't looked super improved, but like, even if we assume she's made zero improvements, KK's 37. Like, one of these next couple fights, it's all going to go downhill. Like that's how this goes at 37. We already know.
It went downhill already. She just dropped the bar far enough to stay relevant.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's only going to get worse. Like, I don't think we can expect KK to show up any better. And there is some reason to think that she could get worse, from her last fight. Then on top of it, KK, believe it or not, is very small for the division. She's 5'3".
Yes.
Belbita's 4 inches taller. She's 4 inches longer. KK, KK likes to scrap. It's not as if she's going to sit on the outside and just jab and move, make Belbita miss. She'll get down there and swing with her a bit. And I think it's going to be a lot easier for Belbita to land some of her stuff than it is for KK here.
Damn it, John.
And yeah, I don't want to do it, believe me. I'm like looking at
We're doing it. That's it.
On top of which, dude, we've seen Diana Belbita hurt multiple women in her mixed martial arts career. I've never seen KK hurt anybody on the feet. So it's like there's a power edge, there's a 10-year youth edge, there's a reach and height edge, there's just a general physical intangibles edge on the Belbita side. Yes, the level of competition and the skills favor KK. I don't disagree with that. But there does come a point in every fighter's career where physical intangibles start to outweigh, just general skill advantages. And I think it's your point. I think Karolina hit that point a while ago, but the bar has been lower here. I don't think Belbita has to improve that much to go from being plus 140 to minus 140. I don't know if I'll bet her, but I am leaning that side. Like, I could never bet KK at this price.
I'm doing it. I'm back on the train. We are betting Diana Belbita on Saturday. My guy just confirmed everything that I needed to hear. It's absolutely happening. And one thing that I was looking at, not only my guy, Dixon Sider over here, looking at the people talking about the grappling and the submissions and things like that, but, we're talking about maybe KK having a grappling edge. But, John, one of the notes that I made is how relentlessly aggressive Diana Belbita is off of her back. She throws up triangles. She throws up arm bars. She's attacking with elbows. Like, there's going to be no place where Karolina can get a break from eating punishment, even if she's on top of Diana Belbita. So unless she takes the back, that's the one safe place that she will have grappling, is taking the back. And then I looked over and I was like, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not really sold on Karolina's grappling. I know she's been doing a lot of it lately, but really, what are we looking at here? 2 of her professional losses are by submission. She's been finished 3 times, and of those 2, 2 of those 3 have been by sub. So I'm like, oh my God, we got a 10-1 hanging here on Diana Belbita, who is the bigger, younger, probably more physical fighter with a height and reach advantage. And if you make somebody shoot on you because they don't like getting hit in the face, what happens? They usually do it sloppily. They usually leave their neck out there. Women's MMA arm bars happens all the time. I am back on the Belbita train. We're going to go Belbita, and we're going Belbita sub.
In addition to that, too, it's like if you think KK is going to grapple a lot, like that is my concern on the Belbita side. But people forget, KK is not very good off her back. And if she's going to be initiating scrambles here, it's very plausible she could end up there and just lose rounds on her back, too. Like Karolina plays guard when she's grounded, and she's not very good from guard, but she does do it. So it is interesting.
All right, we're doing it live. It's happening. We're going to be betting it. I'm seeing plus 140, plus 143, I think, out there might be the best number. That's happening. As soon as I get off the pod, we're going to bet it. And we got 10-1 on the sub prop. That is happening also. All right, everybody, bear with me here. Let's pay a couple of bills this evening. We've first and foremost got our host here, our channel, our main sponsor, Pub Sports Radio. If you guys haven't checked out pubsportsradio.com, what are you waiting for? They've got betting contests, both for UFC and for non-UFC. So we've got like the Cappers contest going right now for football season that they do annually, the Survivor contest. But the big one that I know you degenerates are going to love is the free entry MMA contest weekly, every single Saturday, no entry fee. Sign up at Pub Sports Radio. Winner gets $100. All you got to do is pick your fighter, pick your round, pick your method, and the winner gets $100 on Pub Sports Radio. You also get your belt level here based on your finishes, and I'm still missing my black belt, man. I've won 2 of these contests, and you got to win 3 to get that black belt. I'm still hunting for it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Next up, we got Spectation Sports. If you guys know UFC Fight Pass, Spectation Sports basically covers all the regional shows that they don't have, and they are freaking awesome. Iowa Fight Series, Aries FC. We had a couple of awesome events just last week. If you are looking for some regional MMA action, if you want to watch these fighters that are knocking on the door of that UFC opportunity, make sure you check out Spectation Sports. Promo code DIEHARD for 20% off of your subscription when you sign up here. Next up, you've got the Sharp app. We are full swing football season, baby. Basketball is right around the corner. I couldn't care less, but if you want to degen out on basketball, baseball, NFL, the Sharp app has you covered with basically everything. They've got professional bettors that are giving out picks daily. They also have models. They have tracking. They have a ton of tools that will make you a winning bettor. Make sure you check out the Sharp app. We will put a link to the Discord in the description of this channel. Last but not least, we have got Bet Openly. 0% juice, everybody. People are always asking me, John, when I throw Bet Openly out there, do they have any signups? Do they have any deals to sign up? And the answer is no. I'm sorry, guys. They do not have any deals to sign up. Do you know why that is? That is because, if I could find the button here, they save you money. Look at this number right here. Ever since I got with Bet Openly, I have saved $975.83 by simply paying 1% juice instead of laying minus 110. Because it's peer-to-peer, you're betting with other people out there who will accept your action. You are saving money by cutting out the middleman that is the bookie. Trust me, you guys, you want Bet Openly as a tool. We will make sure we get something in here for you to click a link for me here in just a second. But check this out. We were just talking about some of these odds here for UFC. Let's get down to this week here. Johnny Munoz Jr. Plus 100. Aoriqileng plus 100. You're laying minus 110 on this exact fight, no matter which side you pick. You're getting even money over here instead. The numbers on every single fight are always going to be better with Bet Openly. And in the long run, if you're serious about betting and gambling, that is going to save you money. That will make you money. You'll be better off in the long run. So make sure you sign up with Bet Openly. Let me get you a link. Guys, do me a favor and smash the link when I get it for you here in the chat, because that'll drive the traffic. Makes me look good. I appreciate you very much for doing it. But we can move the show right along here. Next up, we have got Bill Algeo taking on Alexander the Great Hernandez. And I feel like we've seen this fight already, John. I really do. And when I say that, I mean that almost quite literally. So Bill Algeo is essentially a clone of Billy Q. They are the same guy, John. I don't understand. It's like we've got Billy Q who beats the brakes off of Alexander Hernandez. He almost gets one punched in round one, but that's Alexander Hernandez. The dude's Conor McGregor. He's got 7 minutes to win a fight, and if he doesn't have the gas tank to keep up the type of fight, the type of pressure, the type of pace that he wants to put on people. He's incredibly skilled. He just can't keep it up for very long. So when you get these weaponized cardio guys, they melt him. He can't keep up with them. He's just not capable of it. The thing is, I wonder if maybe Bill Algeo is not quite the wrestler that Billy Q is. And that's the one thing that this fight comes down to me, because you kind of look back through Alexander Hernandez's career, and the only times he wins when he's not one punching people early is when he's able to take people down and control them. He's very strong, that kid. Very good wrestler, especially as long as his cardio holds up. It wasn't too long ago that Bill Algeo got taken down, I think, 8 times and ground out by Ricardo Ramos. So, I mean, it's a path to victory for sure. You know, when you think about Hernandez, you think it's round 1 or bust. He may actually have some decision equity in this kind of a fight if he's able to just physically control somebody like Bill Algeo. But then the reverse of that is we just saw this, and Bill Algeo can do exactly what Billy Q did. And if Hernandez is not able to keep the grappling going favorably, then he's probably going to die in the 2nd or the 3rd round when his cardio and his bravado runs out, because he gives up on himself after getting punched in the face a few too many times, and you'll get a late finish from Bill Algeo. It's pretty binary to me, and that's kind of what worries me. We've got a pretty close line here, minus 135 for Bill Algeo, plus 115, plus 110, it looks like, for Alexander Hernandez. I'm not going to lie. I kind of feel like the UFC is giving Hernandez another go at it. That's kind of what this feels like to me, right? They say, okay, so you got killed by Billy Q just a couple months ago. They give you Jim Miller. He does exactly what he needs to against Jim, puts him on his back, grinds him out, and they go, now try again, kid. Can you get by the challenge this time? And it seems like they're just giving him another run at the problem that he's faced basically his entire career. He's still a young kid, still feels like he's improving. I mean, I guess he's not that young, 31 years old. He's starting to get up there. But I don't know. I'm kind of feeling an Alexander by decision, but I am not putting my money on this kid. It would not shock me whatsoever if he dies in the 2nd round again.
Yeah, for a long time, I've been a never Alex Hernandez guy in that club. But I'm betting him here. I actually like Alexander Hernandez in this spot. And I understand the angle that Algeo can come out here and do what Billy Quarantillo did. The thing is, I feel like people, it's funny because you literally just made the case here, and the opposite of the case that I'm about to make, where I feel like a lot of people see the cardio and the pace of Bill Algeo, and they're like, oh, he's exactly like Billy Quarantillo. Therefore, he is going to break Alexander Hernandez and beat him, just like Quarantillo did, just like Drew Dober did. Those are really the only 2 times in Alexander Hernandez's career we've really seen him gas bad, Dober and Quarantillo. Both of those fights had 2 big things in common. Dober and Quarantillo basically pressured nonstop for every minute the fight was on the feet. In addition to pressuring nonstop, they do nasty attritional work, leg kicks, tons of body work, tons of clinch work. There's just a level of violence that Drew Dober and Billy Quarantillo bring to the table that I just don't see with Bill Algeo. You know, Bill Algeo, this is a man who has lost 3 decisions where he's landed 30 or more significant strikes than his opponents. That is not something you see much, except from guys who just don't really have much sting in their shots, you know, and who can't really enforce a violent fight. And that's what we've seen with Bill Algeo over and over and over again. And those are not the kind of guys, Alexander Hernandez, it's funny. He's had an odd career, but I kind of think, some of the more recent fights, in particular that Quarantillo fight, have kind of covered up that, this guy's really good. Good. Now, is he as good as people thought he would be? No, he's not.
I got suckered in by that one punch.
Yeah, a lot of people did, but he knocked out Beneil. He grinded out OAM, which has aged wonderfully. He won a decision against Francisco Trinaldo. questionable decision. But again, not many guys. Toronto's a tough fucking guy to fight. Sorry, pardon my French. He's a
no,
tough
you're
guy
fine.
to fight.
Close fight against a really good fighter. Even losing a split decision there still would have been a respectful finish.
Right. So that's my point. And then like the other guys he's fought, it's like Chris Gritzmacher absolutely iced him. Mike Breeden iced him. Jim Miller's still a tough fight. And for all the cardio issues people talk about with Alexander Hernandez, he attempted 100 significant strikes in round 3 of the Jim Miller fight. You know, he did not look like he was someone who was fading hard. And I have serious questions that Bill Algeo has the tools to come out here and really punish him the way that a Drew Dober did, the way that a Billy Quarantillo did. And while they're on the feet, I think Hernandez is the better striker. I think he's the faster striker. He certainly hits harder, and Algeo is certainly a lot easier to hit than he is. I think he's got a decent amount of KO equity early in this fight. To your point, we've seen guys who want to take Algeo down. They do. He can probably take him down whenever he wants in this fight. I'm not sure I would recommend it, given that Bill Algeo is kind of a tricky jiu-jitsu player, and those are the kind of exchanges that could potentially get him in trouble in this fight. But I just look at it and I feel like everybody sees, you know, Algeo's kind of trendy. He's got good cardio. He's got good pace. And they just ignore the fact that, like, let's go through this guy's career. He just beat TJ Brown. He was getting whooped in that fight, early in that fight, if people don't remember. Herbert Burns, who cares? Should be out of the UFC. Joe Anderson Brito, good win. But Joe Anderson Brito might be like the closest parallel to Alexander Hernandez, except he's even more gassy than Hernandez is. And a dead gassed out Brito made that a very, very close fight in rounds 2 and 3, just being able to easily clinch control Algeo and easily get him to the mat. Yep. And then his only other win in the UFC is Spike Carlisle. So it's not like Bill Algeo has this like track record of beating like really good fighters. He's beaten a bunch of pretty bad fighters, and he's got good cardio. And so now the assumption is, oh, Alexander Hernandez is gassed out before. Surely he's going to lose to Bill Algeo. And I look at it and I'm like, man, Alexander Hernandez has fought a lot of really good fighters. He's a pretty good striker. He's much more dangerous of the two, and he's the much better wrestler. Maybe Quarantillo comes out and fights in a manner he hasn't before. Not Quarantillo. Algeo comes out and fights in a manner he hasn't before and just works the body, and he gets, you know, Alex to gas out. But I kind of think Alex is the better fighter here. I can't go big because of the cardio concerns, but I really think he's more skilled here. And so I'm taking the shot on Alexander Hernandez.
Okay. You know what? We might be doing it together here again, man. We really might be, because I've been looking at Alexander Hernandez all week, and it's another one where I'm seeing everybody line up and taking Bill Algeo. And of course, it could look really, really dumb in hindsight, because maybe the obvious answer is the correct one in this case, where it's just a cardio concern thing. But damn, I've just seen him get controlled way too many times. And like you and I both kind of talked about, Hernandez in his last fight looked like he kind of worked out a couple of the kinks as far as his cardio and his load management and pacing himself a little better. And if he can do that here, I think he can win a decision as well. So I'm
145. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would say 145 is like the biggest concern for me here. It's just that it's down at 145 again, which I do have some concerns about. But yeah, I think he's the better fighter. So, and he certainly has the better resume of the two. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. If anything for me, it would just be like a 1 unit shot straight on Alexander Hernandez. I wouldn't be going hard on it. I wouldn't be going heavy on it. It's something very, very small, and we'll see if I actually get there or not. All right. Moving right along, we've got a big one here, man. The big boys are back in the cage. Philipe Lins and Ion Cutelaba. I'm not sure what it is this week. They decided to line up the guys that I mostly want to fade. You know, this is another Karolina situation for me. I am a non-believer of Philipe Lins, man. I know he found the fountain of youth. I know he got his doctor in order. And because of that, he's looking spectacular in his last couple fights. Don't get me wrong. Former heavyweight. The guy has great hands. He's got good speed. He's got solid power. But that all only lasts for about a round. And then he kind of falls off a cliff, man. And he's a bully, John. He's such a bully. If there's nothing coming back his way, he looks like a world beater. You know, I actually thought Maxime Grisham was going to be a guy that would be able to take him out. I bet Maxime Grisham in that spot. And he was able to just kind of maintain the pace and the cardio. I can't get the picture of Marcin Prachnio backing this guy off out of my head. When Marcin Prachnio was cracking this man, he was barely getting out of that fight. So I've got serious doubts and serious concerns over Lins and what he's capable of doing. Now, the question is Is Ion Cutelaba that guy? Ion Cutelaba is another guy who's a bit Hernandez-y, right? Like if he doesn't win early, he's generally not winning. He broke a 3-fight skid with his win over Tanner Boser, and he was taking on just a real rough run of guys before that. Kennedy Nchukwu, Johnny Walker, Ryan Spann, like definitely got his little step down, and that's what it takes. Anytime he gets a step down, he looks like a world beater again. Ion Cutelaba's definitely got UFC caliber offense. He's also got some serious quit in him and maybe a questionable chin. I wonder if he can get the wrestling going. You know, Philipe Lins is a guy who's got a very, very solid takedown game. Again, he's a former heavyweight, so he's a big dude. He knows how to keep these guys off him. But I think back to the days of Jared Cannonier. You know, we actually saw Ion Cutelaba like go to his wrestling game really solidly, and he kind of got away from it. I think if he goes back to it here, where he mixes the wrestling and the striking, I think he can give some serious problems to Philipe Lins here in this spot. And frankly, I just want to fade Philipe Lins every opportunity that I get. The problem is this line is a bit weird. I don't want to lay minus 155 on Ion Cutelaba in this spot. I wish maybe I had taken the poke on him earlier when he was an underdog. I think I'm just going to kind of sit back and watch on this one. I could see this fight play out a lot of different ways. This could be a slow, ugly clinch fest. It could be a one-round banger. I don't want to lay that price tag on a guy who packs up his bag and goes home. So I think I'm going to pass, but I'm going to pick Ion to get the win.
Yeah, it's weird because like my initial instinct when I saw it is I'll probably bet Lins just because of like all, you know, the things you just said about and the chat saying about Ion being a quitter, gassy, et cetera, et cetera. The thing is, if we want to talk about it, the betting market, and talk about it as a market, that's more than priced into the line in Ion fights at this point, right? Everybody knows he's a quitter. You're not getting an edge betting against Ion's cardio. It's completely priced into the line. You know, there's not, trust me, if you're thinking about it, everybody else is thinking about that with regard to this fight. And yet the lines continue to move towards Cutelaba, which I think is interesting here. On top of which, when I took a deeper dig at it, you know, you always forget this because he doesn't look old, but you know, Philipe Lins is 38 years old. Ion Cutelaba is 29 and Lins is 38. And I kind of feel like Lins is someone who's kind of, you know, because he's gotten a couple of cheap wins against, you know, OSP, who's completely washed. Yikes, I bet OSP in that fight. But nonetheless, completely washed OSP. Prochnio, who's not very good. And so he's kind of gotten some respect back here. But people forget, yeah, he used to be a heavyweight. But prior to that, he was in Bellator. He actually moved to heavyweight for PFL after he got knocked out twice in a row at light heavyweight in Bellator because he was starting to get the reputation for being chinny. I don't think, on top of that his cardio is the best either. We have seen this guy slow down bad in extended fights before.
Yes.
So unlike some of these other guys who have walked through, I'm like Kennedy and Nchukwu, I cannot think of a worse matchup like in the UFC for Cutelaba than like Kennedy and Nchukwu.
Oh my gosh,
you
I know. The rope
guy. Terminator. Yeah, exactly. You know, even like Johnny Walker, it's like very good counter grappler, huge guy who somehow improved his cardio. Ion Cutelaba has mostly been losing to the top of the division or guys around the top of the division. And even if you go back to the Spann fight, yeah, he lost the Spann, but people forget he was literally ragdolling Spann in that fight. He tripped on an entry into a takedown and tripped right into a guillotine and lost the fight. It's not like he got owned by Ryan Spann or quit in that fight. And so I look at these two, and my feeling is, yes, is it possible Cutelaba swarms him, doesn't get him out of there, gasses out, and gets finished? That's certainly one potential outcome. I also think it's possible he swarms him and knocks out the guy that's known for being chinny at 205, who's also 38 years old.
Yep.
And on top of that, you know, one fight you didn't mention, in addition to the Cannonier fight, a couple fights ago, Cutelaba fought Devin Clark, who was a college wrestler and controlled him on the mat for 15 minutes. Literally went out there and just mauled the dude for 15 straight minutes.
Broke his teeth.
Yeah, I'm not sure he can't do the same thing to Cutelaba here. You know, I feel like Cutelaba's 3-6 in his last 9. I get it, but he's been fighting good competition. He's clearly got good skills. He's 29 and I believe training in Extreme Couture still right now. So I would expect some improvements to come from him, whereas Lins is 38 and kind of is what he is. I don't think he's got great gas himself. I don't really think Lins is going to have an easy time separating on minutes in this fight either way, unless his cardio shows up in a better state than it has at any other point in his career. And I like the skill set that Cutelaba has a fair bit more than I like the skill set that Lynch has. So I'm with you. I'm not really trying to lay the Cutelaba price because anytime there's a risk that your fighter that you're betting is going to go from 100 to 0 in a 5-minute period, I can't really, get behind laying juice at that, especially when you're talking about something near 60% implied, like we were talking about with this particular fight. But at the same time, yeah, I think Cutelaba is the better. I think he is the much better fighter here, just skill wise, and just from a macro standpoint. I think he's got a lot more advantages than Linz does. What I do think is kind of interesting, and I'm not normally a 1.5 and under 1.5 type guy. If anything, I'm an over goes the distance type guy in those kind of fights. I actually think the under here at Pick'em is kind of interesting. I mean, Cutelaba is going to take it to him, and obviously Lynch hits hard. Obviously, Cutelaba does as well. I think one of these guys going out very early in this fight seems much more likely than not, personally. But yeah, I lean the Cutelaba side.
Okay, I'm glad you kind of agree with me there, John. Can you hear me? First off,
I can hear you, but you are frozen on my screen.
I am frozen. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kick us off here on this next breakdown, and then I'm gonna try and fix my camera. I'm gonna dip out and come back in while you're talking about it. So let me go ahead and cue us up here real quick. Drew Dober takes on Aoriqileng. And this one's one that I think I can save a little bit of air on, John. I think this is the Crimson Chin. Shout out my guy Liam Picks Fights for the nickname all day. I'm really not sure what to make of Aoriqileng at this stage of his career. I mean, I kind of feel like he's a middle of the road kind of guy. I thought he was tough and durable, got knocked out in his last fight. Like, I'm just confused. I'm really not sure where he shines, what he's good at, what he's bad at. Is he on the decline? I don't know. The one thing I know is Drew Dober can take one hell of a punch, and he hits really freaking hard. I know that's a lame breakdown, but I don't really like this fight much. So I'm going to pick Drew Dober to get the win, and I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. I will now kick it to you. I'm going to full screen you, and I'm going to bounce myself out of here and try and come back and see if that fixes my camera, and we'll try and limp our way through the end of the show here.
Cool. Works for me. Yeah, so I think this is kind of an interesting fight, personally. I'm probably not going to bet Aoriqileng, even though he is plus 300, just because, I mean, look, obviously Drew Dober is a much more proven fighter. Aoriqileng is, there you are. I see you. I don't hear you, though. Now I hear you. Now I hear you. Aoriqileng is coming off being KO'd, which is obviously of great concern to me with regard to this fight, and especially with regard to fighting someone like Drew Dober. But Drew Dober himself is actually coming off being KO'd here. And I think the reality of this fight is, yes, Drew Dober is the better fighter. He's fought better guys. He's the more dangerous of the two. He's going to come forward and bring it to you. We know that. I also think, though, Drew Dober's iron chin might be starting to crack a little bit, or at least rust a tad. You know, we saw Matt Favola put him out in his last fight, but even prior to that, he got wobbled a couple times by Bobby Green. He got hurt a couple times by Brad Riddell. You know, the guy's taken a lot of damage in there. He's a 40-fight veteran who has, he's taken some damage, and at some point that chin goes. And so there's a part of me that sort of thinks the Glenn side might just be value by default. I think a lot of people are seeing Glenn get KO'd last fight and are turning around and betting Dober. Like I said, I'm not that interested in Glenn because I'm a Dober fan. I think Dober's a much better fighter. He really should handle business. One thing I am kind of interested in, it's going to be like super contrarian, I know, just from some of the guys I know and what they're playing in this fight. I kind of like a side to the over here, which is like plus 175. Glenn's only been knocked out once in his career, and that was in his last fight. Had he gone the distance with Jagos there? Is the over plus 175? I really don't think so. I really think it's largely a reaction to, what happened in his last fight. And we all know it's MMA. It's 4-ounce gloves. Guys go out. And Christos Jagos, early in fights, is as dangerous. He hurt Zellhuber a couple times, who's as durable as they get.
Could have been a bad night. Could have been the perfect shot. Could have lots of things.
Right. And so I'm almost inclined to, as one of the friends of your podcast, Johnny, would say, like, kind of side with the mean reversion thing here. And I take the over on a fight with two guys who are historically very durable and bet on Aoriqileng not getting KO'd for the second time in his career here. That's kind of how I'm leaning. I haven't decided if I'll do it. But I think this could be a scrap. Dober should win, but I don't know. I have a very, very weird feeling about Dober. And like he could be one of those guys who, when all the damage finally does wear out his chin, it could get ugly really fast. And I don't want to be standing in front of that when it happens.
Absolutely. Completely understand, man. And this one does have that reek of it, you know what I mean? Where it's obvious. It's just so obvious. Drew's been up there with the best of them, and Aoriqileng got KO'd in his last fight. They're both, 2-3 in their last 5, but for some reason one guy is minus 450 and everyone's on him. So no, I'm kind of there with you. I'm a little spooked out about this fight myself, and coming off of the absolute massacre that Matt Frivola put on this man in his last fight, it's not a comfortable position for me to be laying that kind of price tag again. So I'm more than happy just kind of leaving this fight alone.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Well, glad we see eye to eye on that one. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this next one, man. You know, one thing I haven't done a whole lot is really talk to the chat here. And you guys need to understand that my life and my family's well-being really is dependent on you guys hitting the like button. So if you haven't done that, do me a favor, pop on down there, hit the like button. If you don't know, you should know. My guy MMA Fox from the Club and Sub podcast is joining us tonight to break down UFC Vegas 80. Give him a follow. Check him out on social. He puts on a great show every week as well. Next up, you've got Alex Morono taking on Joaquin Buckley. I love this fight. I love this fight so much. So you can always count on my guy, Alex Morono, for an absolute banger. He doesn't know how to fight otherwise. He always just comes in and throws the kitchen sink at absolutely everybody. And it feels like he is always extremely underrated. It's really funny, man. I went on for the longest time about just how underrated this guy is and how he's way better than people give him credit for. And then I bet on him against Chaos Williams, and I found out that I love power punchers yet again, and I love Chaos Williams. So then I started trying to fade the guy, and what do? I bet Anthony Pettis against him. Well, no, that didn't go my way either. So now I'm, for some reason, fading the guy that for years I've been saying is underrated, and he goes on a 4-fight win streak. Like, it's one of those ones where I kind of, you know, in poker, they call it fancy play syndrome. You know, you're thinking a level too deep. You're like, this guy's going to do this, so now I'm going to do this, so then I'm going to do that instead. Like, it ain't that hard, bro. Like, I should have just stuck to my guns. I should have just said this guy is the guy and he's being disrespected. Ride the train. I missed out on the train. And now here we are in a spot where, once again, I'm just not sure how I feel. Like, he's definitely a middle of the road kind of guy. I think we've proven that. You know, it being deaded by Santiago Ponzinibbio after a war, it's not really a mark against him. That, you know, that's a respectable fight and a great fighter that hits really hard doing that to you. Going and finishing a guy like Tim Means, going to war and just absolutely styling on a guy like Matt Simmelsberger. Like, we know he's solid, but Buckley has a distinct athletic advantage here in this fight, man. And that's something that I just can't quite get past. I don't want to just be the chalk donkey that picks all the favorites, but I kind of feel like that's what I'm doing here in this spot. Now, obviously, we picked a couple of underdogs earlier on in the card, but I mean, in this spot, it just feels like the chalk is right. Like, I know he got knocked out by Chris Curtis. I know he got overpowered by Nasruddin Imavov, but are those two things really so bad? Like, I know I'm higher on Chris Curtis than 90% of people out there. I fully respect what that man is capable of, but I don't think Morono hits anywhere near as hard as Chris Curtis. I also don't think he sets up the body shots the way that Chris Curtis does that kind of led to that knockout punch. You know, you take the Alhassan fight where he went to D1 Buckley. I think that's more than in play here. We've seen Alex Morono play BJJ off his back. He refuses to wrestle, even though he's a BJJ black belt and would be very effective from top. He just don't do it. So I think Buckley's got a path to grappling here. I think he hits harder than Alex Morono does. Maybe he's not quite as high on the volume, but I think those more impactful shots are going to mean something in this spot. I know a lot of people are on Alex Morono in this spot, and even though I do completely agree that generally speaking he's underrated, can't do it. I think Buckley's going to win this fight, man.
It does have the feel of a square underdog here with Alex Morono. It does have that feeling, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I think it's a very, very cool fight. It's
a good one.
You know, I am a big fan of both of these guys. Like you, I've always been very, very much on the Alex Morono is underrated train. And Joaquin Buckley, I was betting him before it was popular to bet him. I bet him against Impa at like plus 250 way back in the day. You know, I like Joaquin Buckley's game. Obviously, he's one of the most dangerous power punchers in the division. Mm-hmm. He does a tremendous job of minimizing exchanges. You know, it's funny because for a guy that's got the kind of, you know, power and finishing ability that a Joaquin Buckley does, you don't really see him bite down in the pocket much. Actually, you know, even talking about that Chris Curtis fight, you know, I bet Buckley in that fight. He looked great prior to the KO. You know, he was doing a really good job keeping Curtis off balance in that fight, staying in and out on him. And on the other side, you know, with Morono, you have another guy who I think It's definitely because he's got full dad bod syndrome, like Alex Morono, but like the market just doesn't like him. But this guy, he pushes a hellacious pace in every fight. I actually think he's an underrated hitter. He's hurt a bunch of guys in the UFC. Obviously, you go back to the Ponzinibbio fight, which is his last loss, but he almost finished Ponzinibbio in both the first and the second round of that fight prior to getting knocked out himself. And so there's a part of me that wants to back Morono here because he's got all that experience. He is a high output guy. He does hit kind of hard, and we've seen Buckley finish before. But at the same time, to your point, I think the athleticism gap here is very, very wide. I think the speed gap is pretty wide as well. Buckley just covers distance so fast. And, Morono's done a really, really good job out voluming and kind of dancing around like slower, kind of plodding guys. Like, you go back to his fight with Max Griffin. Max Griffin, really good striker. Him and Buckley would be a good scrap. But Max Griffin, he's a boxer, and Morono was able to just kind of easily outdance him in that fight. Same thing with Matt Semmelsberger. Morono, if you're kind of a stationary fighter, he's very, very good at getting his volume off against you. Buckley's not that, though. Buckley chooses when to engage very tactically and very intelligently, and when he does, it's extremely violent. Of the two, I think I trust his chin a bit more at this point, with Morono being 33, having taken a couple violent knockouts over the last 5 years. Obviously, a lot more mileage and wear and tear, on the tires than what Buckley has on his. And, Buckley, to me, Buckley's a guy who's clearly getting better, whereas Morono is a guy, I don't want to say he's declining yet. I'm not prepared to say that, but we're not going to see, we have seen the best version of Alex Morono in MMA. Mm-hmm. Like, that is what he is. He's not getting better, whereas Buckley's ceiling, I still think, has been undecided. To your point, I think the Buckley wrestling path could be live here, but Morono, when he chooses to, is pretty good at getting up. He's not easy to control if he doesn't want to be controlled. So I don't know that Buckley will chase it. I expect him to strike. There's a part, like I said, there's a part of me that wants to bet Morono, but I don't know. I sort of think Buckley has a lot more finishing equity. And in particular, Morono just seems to be getting cracked a bit more than he used to get cracked. And that is not something you really want to set yourself up with against a guy like Joaquin Buckley, who is very, very dangerous. So I'm picking Buckley here. I have a bad feeling about the Morono side, honestly. It's like you said, it seems like everybody's betting Alex Morono this week. I just have this feeling that, it could be another coming out party for Buckley here and kind of, the beginning of the end for Morono.
Dude, I'm waiting for that line to drop as low as it'll go, and then I will play Buckley. So one thing that you mentioned that I've been just licking my chops over here, I'm ready to pounce on, is you talked about how we were heads up on the Chris Curtis fight, right?
Yeah.
You and I think very similarly when it comes to betting. We're both value hunters. We're both looking for that crazy underdog that people are just not crediting enough. And I play the exact same way. So like, I totally understand the way you played the fight that way. And in that spot, I did something that I almost never do. I just picked the winner, John. I put everything in my brain off to the side and I went, the inevitable conclusion of this fight. I pulled out my crystal ball and I said, eventually, Chris Curtis is going to find the mark and he will put Buckley down with a body shot. And that's exactly what happened. Now, it's very, very rare that, first off, I call things like that. Second off, I'm right about things when I call them like that. So it doesn't happen a lot. Thankfully, it's usually Chris Curtis when it does happen. But that's what I did in that spot. I bet Chris Curtis. I did it very confidently because I just knew, man. But you watch that fight. Chris was not winning a single second of that fight until he landed the knockout blow. That is one of those losses that does nothing but boost my confidence in a fighter. That you're like, you know what, man? He got punched right on the floating rib. I would have gone down too. Like, he didn't do anything wrong in that performance whatsoever. And if he fights anything like that, I think he beats Alex Morono. And if he goes back to D1 Buckley, I think he can out-grapple Alex Morono. Like, I think he's got Morono covered in essentially every aspect of the game except the pure jiu-jitsu. And I just don't see the fight playing out pure jiu-jitsu all that much in this spot. I think people are looking for an opportunity to fade Joaquin Buckley. This ain't it. I like him here, man. I'm going to take him in this spot.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to pick him. I probably won't bet him, though. The Great White is my guy.
Oh, me too. I love him so much, man. Those scrappy, underappreciated underdogs, those are always my guys. Like, I love rooting for them. And it's funny. I always tell my wife, betting makes MMA really hard because there are times where people are like, oh, who do you like in this fight? And I'm like, I don't know. I love them both so much. You find out as soon as the cage door closes. The second the cage door closes and they're swinging fists, you know exactly who you want to win that fight because you're like, oh God, I don't want him to get hurt. I want him to, and you find out real quick who you're really a fan of. And that happens to me so much in these spots, especially when I bet against guys like Morono. Not a fan of doing it. Probably gonna have to here in this spot though.
Yeah, I hear you.
What it is.
I hear you.
Pain, but hopefully I'll make some money and that'll make me feel a little bit better. Next up, we have got the poster child for Dana White's Contender Series, Joe Pyfer. You're going to hear that 20 times on Saturday. They're going to run so many hype trailers, and that's going to be the quote that gets thrown out there. So just be prepared for it, everybody. He is taking on Abdul, Razak, Alhassan. And I do have a bet here on this one, John. It's another one that's not super common for me. You know, I'm not usually the biggest chalk eater in the world. I'm not usually the guy that looks down the line ahead at other fights, but I think I found a free square. I don't want to say the L word because I never use the L word, man. But if you parlay up Joe Pyfer being put in a position where the UFC wants him to quite obviously succeed, Khamzat Chimaev being put in a position where the UFC obviously wants him to succeed, and then you look all the way down the road at UFC 296 where the UFC is sacrificing Wonderboy Thompson to Shavkat Rakhmonov. Those three legs get you even money. And I know that's just disgusting. I know that's sickening to do a 3-leg parlay and only get even money out of it. But I think that's the move. I put a big fat bet on it, John. It's a 5-unit play for me. I just don't really see any of those guys losing. Now, it could happen. Don't get me wrong. Abdul Razak Alhassan hits like an absolute truck. And especially in round 1, he is very, very dangerous. But Joe Pyfer is going to have the height and reach advantage. Joe Pyfer has shown some really good range management and timing. He's got power of his own. We have seen Abdul Razak Alhassan get knocked out. We've also seen him get dragged around the cage and controlled, which is something I think Joe Pyfer can go to. So I think if this fight gets extended, he's another guy that just really primarily only wins in round 1. If you get him out of round 1, he's just not quite the same guy, and you can style on him at that point. I think there's a lot of ways Joe wins this fight as long as he doesn't die in round 1. And obviously, we'll get to the other fights down the line at some point, but I think Paulo Costa sucks. I've been talking about him being fraudulent for years now. He's finally been exposed, and the UFC wants Khamzat an easy path to a title shot. That's why that fight is being made. And Wonderboy pissed the UFC off, and they're doing everything they can to kill him on national television, giving him a grappler who's an absolute stud. I love those last 2 legs. Arguably the riskiest one of the bunch is Joe Pyfer here on Saturday. If I get by Joe Pyfer, I think I'm cashing a ticket. So here we go. That's the preview. That's the breakdown. Got a lot more writing on Joe Pyfer than I probably would like to at this money line, but he's the side. What do you make of this one, man?
Well, I certainly hope Joe Pyfer's not a free square. I bet Abdul Razak Alhassan here.
Of course you do.
I think Joe Pyfer's good. I obviously, don't get me wrong, but I also feel as if the fight's probably going to be a brawl. I suppose there could be some grappling equity on the Pyfer side, but like no one's really, Abdul Razak Alhassan has faced a lot of guys who have tried to grapple him in his career. Omari Akhmedov in his prime took him down 5 times and struggled to control him. Buckley obviously took him 5 times. He kept getting up in that fight. I don't really think he's very, very likely to be kept on the mat for too long here. And so I ultimately think they're going to strike a lot. And if they strike a lot, I think Pyfer's the better striker. He's obviously taller, he's longer, younger, hits hard himself. But I also don't think he has, the best defense I've ever seen either. You go back to I think it was his last fight before his Contender Series fight. He fought a guy named Austin Trotman, guy with 3 fights, and the 2 of them went to absolute war in that fight for about 7 minutes before he finished him. And I watched that fight, and I can't help but thinking, these guys, they're going to bite down and swing here. And if they bite down and swing, I do favor Pyfer in that kind of fight. But, Razak's got dynamite in his hands. Like, you're giving me a plus 375. You're giving me, like, 22% implied for, one of the most dynamic KO punchers in the UFC's history in a fight that very likely is going to play out in a brawl. To me, I make Pyfer a favorite here. Obviously, I think he is the better grappler for sure. I think he has some grappling equity. I think he's the better striker, but I think it's going to mostly play out on the feet. And even with respect to the cardio, it's probably a safe bet that Pyfer's got better cardio, but he's also a man who hasn't really been pushed deep into fights all that much. In fact, he's only gone to a decision once in his career, and it was his second professional fight way back in 2018. Since then, he's never gone past 2.5 minutes into round 2. So I think it's pretty interesting. Like, I think these guys are going to come out here, probably bite mouthpieces and just swing here. I think Pyfer probably has the better hardware to win that swinging match. But at the price they're giving out on Alhassan here, I had to take a small poke at it.
Okay. That is fair enough. I can't argue with that really whatsoever. And it's almost an auto bet. Abdul Razak Alhassan in round 1 is, I think, plus 750 right now. Yeah. If you're going to give the guy an opportunity to bang, he can bang with the best of them in the first round. And that's never a bad shot. So can't argue with it, man. I am definitely betting the winner here in this spot. Yeah, I'm trying to pick the winner here, not necessarily betting a line. So I'm with you. I do see the value. I do see the danger. I do think at the end of the day that what we're going to get is a Joe Pyfer with his hand raised. And I'm hoping he can keep the distance and avoid that head kick.
I think he'll be fine there. I don't think he's getting head kicked.
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully not. All right. Main event time, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go. We've got Grant Dawson taking on Bobby Green. And what is a weird changing of the guard type of fight? I mean, we've been talking about Grant Dawson for the last couple of years pretty heavily, man. We have been watching the UFC bring this guy along very slowly, very intelligently, giving him opportunities, giving him decent matchups. He went to a much better gym. He's getting better training, and it looks like it's really starting to pay off. I remember watching the Ricky Glenn fight, and that's the one where I really started to suspect that this kid was not going to be what we thought maybe he could be. And then he flipped the script on its head. Instead of getting tired and gassing out and being helpless deep in the fight, he started finishing guys in the third round, putting such a pace on them that they could not keep up with him and getting them out of there instead of going to these decisions where you were worried about maybe getting a draw. So I'm very impressed with the evolution of Grant Dawson. The problem here for me is the Demiris Magulov fight. I can't remember. I got to go back and check. I think I actually bet Demiris Magulov in that spot because I just thought the striking wasn't quite going to be there. I thought the difference was going to be a little too much, too much of a step up. But damn, that backpack. Like, Grant Dawson can just find the back of literally anybody, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. It's really rough trying to fade this guy in that aspect. And Bobby Green, he's a tough son of a bitch, man. I love Bobby Green. I've gone to the well value style with Bobby Green more times than I can count. And it almost seems like he's at the end of the run, man. It seems like he's out there for a paycheck now. It seems like he's fighting just for fun. Like, I know he went out and did the damn thing against Tony Ferguson, but that was Tony Ferguson. He was going to knock out, regardless of the headbutt, he was going to knock out Jared Gordon. I'm pissed they took that one from me because he was absolutely going to knock out Jared Gordon. But when he takes on these mid to upper tier guys, he fights tough for a round or two, and then he just kind of concedes his fate to being controlled and taken down and out grappled. And he's tough to control. He's hard to take down. He's tough to out grapple. But when you get that size discrepancy on him, and I know they're going to be relatively close in stature in this spot, that's the one thing that kind of has me questioning is, can Grant Dawson do it again? Can he just keep backpacking fools? Because if he can, that's all that we need in this fight. But if Bobby Green's savvy enough, if Bobby Green's slicker than Demiris Magulov, all of a sudden this turns into a kickboxing match. And this fight gets real interesting if it's a kickboxing match. So I'm kind of tempted at this money line to take a little sprinkle on Bobby Green. Just one more time, man. One last ride for the kid. I'm going to pick Grant Dawson to get the win. It's dog or pass from a betting perspective, in my opinion. But I don't know, man. I don't think I can go too hard on this one either way.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby's literally one of my 2 or 3 favorite fighters ever. Like, absolutely love Bobby Green. Love him as a fan. Love to watch him. I've bet on him a million times. Yeah, he's the man. Like, he's one of the best Joe Rogan episodes I've ever heard was Bobby Green out with him. The guy is he's an entertainer to his core. Love everything about him. I think Grant's going to steamroll him, though. Grant Dawson, here's the thing. I've been way higher on Grant Dawson throughout his career than most of the MMA Twitter sphere, betting sphere, like whatever you want to call it, in part because, look, I understand his striking is really ugly. You won't have any dispute from me there. But I think the man blends jiu-jitsu and wrestling in a manner that we've only really seen like the top level Russians do. You know, the Makhachevs, the Khabibs. Now, do I think he's quite as good a wrestler as those guys? No. But when this guy gets the top position, man, he is an absolute animal. It's very hard to get up against him. If you give your back at all, I mean, his back takes are as fast as like some of these 125ers with their back takes. It's absolutely crazy how fast he locks down position. And, you know, I go back and, you know, I watched Dawson against Makhachev. And obviously, again, they're different fights. Makhachev's obviously the current champion. But the way you saw Makhachev just absolutely maul this guy when he got the top makes me kind of think it's going to go pretty similarly here. Because the truth is, the guys who have tried to grapple Bobby in recent years, none of them, other than Makhachev, are anywhere near Dawson's level. You know, you got Thiago Moises, who, whatever. Venata tried a little bit. Trinaldo tried a little bit. You know, he hasn't really fought a real monster grappler other than Makhachev. And we saw in that fight, the moment Makhachev got on top of him, it was a wrap. And he just absolutely cut through him there. And I say this as somebody who was trying to make a Bobby Green case against Makhachev because, oh, you know, historically, he's a good scrambler. It's a big price, 5 rounds. I think there are aspects of Makhachev's game that are better than Dawson's, but I think there's aspects of Dawson's game on the mat that are better than Makhachev's. And Bobby does like to give up his back to get up. It's one of his favorite ways to get up.
That is so true, man. I've talked about that so many times.
Yeah. So I kind of feel like, Bobby could knock him out on the feet, but I feel like Grant's chin is like underratedly good. Like we've seen the guy eat some howitzers standing.
Yeah.
Like he reacts awkwardly, but he doesn't go down. And we know, unlike some people, you know, where it's like, oh, I really hope they attempt takedowns. We know Grant Dawson's doing one thing. He's coming out there and he is trying to drag you to the
There's
mat.
no question what the game plan is.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he is going to get Bobby down fairly early here. And I think when he does, he's going to tear through him. I mean, minus 400 is a big price, especially, I mean, you referenced the Glenn fight, and obviously it's very, very difficult to unsee round 3 of the Ricky Glenn fight because that was just, you know, one of the worst looks I've like ever seen, you know, for a guy in terms of like cardio death late in that fight. But so I don't really want to bet minus 425, but I do think, you know, if my read is right, he is going to finish Bobby here. And I kind of think the minus 135 to win inside the distance on the Dawson side is pretty good. Because I think he's going to get on top of him early and just absolutely cut through him. Whether that's a sub or a KO with ground and pound, I don't know. He has pretty vicious ground and pound in addition to a good submission game. Look, I would love to see Bobby win one more time. It would be awesome. But you nailed it. He's 37, man. Like, I got to say, despite beating Tony Ferguson, I mean, I didn't think he looked particularly great in that fight. You know,
I bet Tony in that fight.
Right. That's and Tony arguably won the first round of that fight. Like, this is my point. Like, I thought Bobby looked the slowest he's ever looked in his career there. You know,
Agreed.
The truth is he's had a lot of Bobby's a legend and he's fought a ton, but he's also old. And we've already seen him when he against someone with a heavy top game get run through here. I'm not saying it can't go any other way. Obviously it can. But I think Grant's going to absolutely destroy him here. I think it's a tailor-made matchup for Dawson. I think they're trying to give him a win over someone with a decent name, you know, so they can kind of market a 5-rounder fight night with someone who's really good in his next outing out there.
Absolutely. No, man, I am right there with you. I think that you have talked some sense into me. You know, the Bobby Green back position is something that I've talked about a lot. And it wasn't until you said it that it kind of triggered. And I was like, why didn't I put that in my notes this week? Like, I literally always bring that up. And it's more relevant in this fight than it ever has been. So thank you for mentioning that. And yeah, man, it's not like Bobby Green hasn't been finished. He's looked a whole lot worse lately. I think time may have come for him, and this is a 5-rounder. So as much as Bobby Green does have cardio for days, as much as he is a tough son of a bitch and he always is in there and he's ready to fight and he'll take on anybody, this is probably the one where it's almost attritional. You know, if he gets his back taken and just gets worked for 15 minutes, they might save him. I would be looking for maybe like the late round sprinkles, 3, 4, and 5
No.
TKO or something like that for Grant Dawson. And I might just straight up look at it inside the distance. And now that we've kind of talked it through, I felt like maybe the minus 400 was a little bit wide, but honestly, man, you're probably right that it's just not that wide. And it's a decent parlay anchor spot. If you want to hedge out on Bobby Green at plus 300, if you'd like the parlays, that's an easy way to do things.
Dawson Murata, not a bad parlay.
Not a bad parlay. We're looking for a way to get on some Kanako Murata. This is not a bad way to go. I like the way you think, my guy. And speaking of liking the way somebody thinks, my guy Dixon reporting that I have cashed my degenerate football bet, Wan'Dale Robinson, over the 19.5 yards I tweeted out before the show. You love to see it. I got to go get caught up on that football game. I am anti-sweating Ken Walker so bad tonight. He's my guy. I got him off waivers in Dynasty. I've loved him ever since he broke out, and I am facing him in a non-Dynasty league this evening. I need him to suck, man. I need him to just not go off tonight so I can win this week. So I'm going to go watch some football, John. Thank you so much for being on the show with me tonight. Always love your perspective, man. Shout out, let the people know where they can support you, where they can find you, what you've got going on coming up here for breakdowns and stuff like that. The floor is yours.
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter at MMA Fox. Always love talking fights. You want to hit me up in a DM, chat on Twitter. I don't really care. I'm always down to talk about it. I'm the co-host of the Club and Sub podcast, which I do with Danny Lags. We do it every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on our YouTube channel, the Club and Sub podcast. Would love a follow. But yeah, we talk fights every week, talk bets, try to keep it fun, lighthearted. And Clint, big shout out to you. Really appreciate you having me on here again. It was a lot of fun.
Always, man. Always. The guest list has gotten a little bit long in the last year or so. So we're taking a little longer than we used to orbit our way around. So I apologize that it took us until October to get you on the show, but was happy to do it. We will definitely do it again sometime soon and get you back. Hopefully a little sooner this time around, man. We appreciate your time. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in and being a part of the show. Could you believe we are in October already? Holy crap, Q4. This year flew by. Everybody get out there. Make sure you're protecting that bankroll. Don't do what I did this weekend in college football. Don't blow it all on a sport that you really don't have any idea what you're doing with. Be smart. Protect those bullets. Keep them in the chamber. We got some good fights coming up at the end of the year. So we will definitely be right here on Pub Sports Radio, breaking these things down for you on the Die Hard MMA podcast. We'll see you later in the week for the Total Takedown. And, of course, the undefeated post-weigh-in show. I have to go bet Diana Belbita. You guys have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next time.
Does anybody else have any other stupid questions for me tonight? Thank you. Have a good night.